Welcome back to Behind the Scenes at Evernote. I'm here today with Nate Fortin, who leads design at Evernote. We're shooting from home because that's still the way things are, but we thought it made sense to take some time to talk to you a little bit about some of the design decisions that have gone into the new clients. Thanks for joining us, Nate.
Thanks, Ian. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation and sharing a little bit of the detail behind the new releases.
Let me get started by talking a little bit about the problem that we were facing when we set out on this journey about 18 months ago. We really had 5 different apps on 5 different devices. And that meant we had 5 different user experiences for our users. And that created real problems for our users and real problems, for us as a company as well. Talk us through what that means from a design standpoint.
I think the reality of the situation before we started this initiative was we had a really different set of experiences on these different devices, to the point where not only were some of the small things different, and so the feature set a little bit different, but even big things like the primary navigation had differences in it. And so even if you had mastered how to get things done on a single device with Evernote, whenever you switched to a new device, what we saw was users had to relearn how to be productive and how to accomplish their goals. And so that's obviously a huge problem for our users. And then on the other hand, what we saw was we're experiencing what was a big problem for us. So not only did we have to build things 5 times, but every feature had to be designed 5 times. And the result of that was, a velocity that didn't really allow us to learn, because we weren't able to ship quickly. We weren't able to learn from that feedback, and then we weren't able to take that feedback and turn it back into a product that we can put into people's hands in a time frame that really mattered. So all of those represented issues that ultimately we need to do something about.
So the challenge we had here really was that we weren't just talking about reskinning the products. We're actually talking about rebuilding them from the ground up. And from an engineering perspective, that gave us opportunities because it meant we could eliminate constraints in our infrastructure and constraints in the internal plumbing of the product that have really stopped us from doing things that users have wanted for a long time. But from a design standpoint, it's also an opportunity to converge to sort of a single set of best practices and best approaches for Evernote. So that's a hard problem to solve. How did you guys go about it?
That represents a pretty huge challenge. This is a situation where there isn't just one solution that's going to work for everybody. Almost every single decision that you make as a designer is going to represent a trade-off to some portion of the user population.
So what do you do when you're faced with, those kinds of trade-offs? You have to come up with one answer, but that one answer is gonna, maybe be great for some users and a little underwhelming to others.
It starts with making users part of the process, right? So we have a very user-centered approach to design. We have users involved every single week, where from the very early parts of the process we're showing rough prototypes and sketches and ideas, to the very end of the process when we have formal beta programs where we're actually uh, watching users use the real product and learning from the different ways where it works, and the where places where it needs to be improved.
So what do we do when we find a design that works well for 90% of our users, but maybe not for 10?
So in that case, I mean, I think what we try to do is make sure we're optimizing for the largest population of users by default. But then ultimately, we're looking to develop a set of accommodations for those other users, right? So that can take many different forms. It might be settings which allow users to tailor the experience to work for their very specific use case, or it may be a set of accelerators that allow them to achieve their goals in a way that doesn't get in the way of users who don't have a need for that functionality in exactly that way. And so there's a range of those opportunities, and I think we've introduced some of those things in the new products. But honestly, there's a lot of work left to do. We're still working on introducing the full range of settings that we have in mind, and there's more accommodations that we need to make sure that we're delivering a great experience for absolutely everybody that uses the product.
Yeah, I mean, density is another great example of that. The the sort of density of information that a user with 400 notes wants is very different than the density of information than a user with 40,000.
That's absolutely right. And in some cases, you have users that are coming to the product for the first time or early in their journey. And so they just don't have that much demand for the product. But you also have users that have been using the product for a really long time, but have very focused use cases. And so they're not using the full set of capabilities of the product. They have kind of a narrower set. And so, and in fact, frankly, that those users represent a pretty large part of the user population. But then you have a set of folks who, we think of as power users. They're very focused on productivity and efficiency, have very robust and sophisticated workflows, and they test the limits of the application. They use a wide range of the features sets, and they use them frequently and repeatedly. And so even little bits of friction end up being really painful for those folks.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, particularly on Mac and Windows, we made it possible for people to continue to use the old apps because maybe we're not quite in the place we want to be yet with the new apps, particularly for some of those power users.
That's absolutely right. And I think, for some users, the apps that we put into the market, and actually many users, the new apps represent an incredibly improved experience for them. And I think that they're really enjoying it. I think for other users, there's a feature here that's missing, or a place where there needs to be a little bit of refinement, and sometimes those things are getting in the way. And I think for those users, sometimes the legacy or the old applications are going to be better until we get to a place where we have the kind of feature completeness that we're aiming for.
All right, so let's get concrete about some of the design decisions that we've made in the new apps. Maybe some that we're pretty happy with, and some that we're still working on getting exactly right. So let's start by talking about the left nav, which is like a really fundamental part of the product. Nate, what were we trying to do with the left nav when we sort of converged on that?
Well, I think really with the left nav, that it really serves as an anchor for the user experience across all of these different devices. It represents a view of your system. And so what we worked really hard to do was make sure that that left nav experience was not only consistent across desktop, but as consistent as we could make it even within mobile and desktop when you compared the two. Ultimately, even if you had mastered one device and hadn't used another device frequently, when you go to pick up that new device to access your information, we wanted you to have a pretty good idea on how to get things done and be able to transfer all that knowledge over. And so the left nav is kind of one of the primary solutions to solving that problem.
And it's a place where there's a lot of room for those accommodations we just talked about.
That's right. I mean, I think you start to see some new features coming in over the last few weeks with things like note counts and things that not all users are interested in, but some users find essential.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about checkboxes and checklists. It's something we've talked a lot about behind the scenes before. And what I want to do is really talk a little bit about the process that got us there. When we introduced checklists, it's a super powerful new capability to the note editor. It lets you create a formatted list of to-do items that is structured, lets you indent them, lets you move them around in chunks. When you check something off, you get a line that gets put through it. And we were really happy with that. But even so, when we put it out, we immediately learned that there were ways that people were using checkboxes that the checklist use case didn't actually solve.
You're right. This is why user research is so important, and this is why we always learn something when we share work with our users. And so, checklists and checkboxes have served really different purposes. We saw, check boxes, like they work really well when you want to put them in the middle of content or wherever you need to in a note, and checklists don't work that well for that. And so with these really distinct use cases, we had hoped to consolidate these features, but we actually learned that wasn't really going to be possible with 9 billion notes already in the system and a lot of checkboxes already employed. Ultimately we need to support both of these features. And so that's the path that we took based on the user research that we've done.
Yeah, and one of the things that's challenging, right, with all the established patterns that our users have, is also trying to get them to understand that there is this new, better feature. If you're used to putting a checkbox at the beginning of your line for a to-do list or something, checklists are absolutely better. But how do we let people know that checklists are there for that purpose while not taking away their checkboxes. That's something we're still working on sort of tuning our way through in these new apps so that users can take advantage of these new better features while still not losing the power of what they've had before. So let's talk about something a little more controversial, which is that tag bar placement in the note editor. We've moved the tag bar basically from the top of the note editor to the bottom of the note editor. Talk a little bit about the design decisions behind doing that.
Well, yeah, remember earlier when I said almost every design decision we make represents a trade-off. And I think this is a really good example of that. So, there's a set of users who, the way their brain works, tags is the best way for them to organize, right? And it's, I think, a very powerful way to organize. It's very flexible and adaptable, and you can create some really amazing organizational systems using that feature. But the reality is that's not the way everybody organizes. In fact, the vast majority of people choose to use either notebooks as a way of kind of organizing and grouping their information so that they can find it later. Or for some people, they really just put everything into a single notebook and they rely on the powerful search that the product has to offer to find what they're looking for. And that works really well for them. So tags is actually a feature that really just serves a smaller part of our population. I think tags users would never believe that because to them, this is the whole reason they use the product, and it's amazing. But one of the reasons we did move tags to the bottom of the screen was in part to kind of get it out of the way of people that don't use tags at all. And the top of the note is one of the most congested places in the interface. But alternatively, we also wanted to put it into a place where there was more screen real estate available for the feature. So not only now you have a more focused place to kind of work with your tags, but also for the future, we could kind of develop the feature because we have more real estate to play with.
So for the less than 5% of users who are actually, committed tags users, some of them are unhappy with this decision. And I understand that. And really, we're continuing to look at what we can do there. Is there an accommodation we can make that if this is important to you, we can, give you some configuration around it? Can you improve it in some way? We're not there yet, but we're continuing to listen and continuing to think about what we can do. Let's talk about the insert menu. One of the things we did again in the note editor was take the group of buttons and controls that used to be at the top of the note editor and keep some of them in the bar and put others into the insert menu. Talk a little bit about where we're going with that and why we did that.
Well, I think first off, the insert menu provides something really helpful for users. It separates all the different ways you can format your note and style your note to bring meaning to it from all of the different objects that you can insert into a note. And so where before you had to sort of hunt all over the place to find these things and they were sort of interleaved, which made it challenging to not just learn, but also to remember where things were. Now there's a really distinct separation of those things. So if you want to insert something to a note, there's one place to go to find all of those things. And it's a much more scalable solution for us so we can continue to add different objects over the future that people are going to find valuable. So that's number one. Number two, we really have a vision for this insert functionality. I think one of the things you'll see in an upcoming release is that we're changing the position on desktop to better align with mobile and also to accommodate the kind of full range of display sizes. One thing we noticed when we scaled out the release is people with really large monitors end up with on the desktop end up with the insert menu on the far right, and it gets way out there away from all the other controls, and that's pretty annoying when you have to kind of when you have that much mouse travel. And so that's something that was unfortunate that we didn't catch earlier, but now we're making a change to kind of bring that again more in line with the rest of the system on mobile in particular on the left side, but also to kind of prevent that situation from occurring with large displays.
And there's work we need to do there to reveal, things like the keyboard shortcuts so that, if you don't want to use the mouse to get there, you can insert the things you want directly from the keyboard, etc. But really the most powerful thing about the insert menu for us is that, over time, we expect to be able to take that functionality and, bring it to you in the place that you are. In the note so that it actually, it's up in the note editor header, up in the formatting bar at top in the insert menu, but it's also where you need it to be in line in the note. And that's, there's the reason that that design construct has been introduced is really forward looking in terms of our ability to give you this powerful capability almost at the place you are in the note as you're directly entering information. So more to come on that front. It's very much being done with intent, and we know where we're going. You haven't actually started to see all the benefit from it yet from a user standpoint, but it's coming. Let's do one more, which is link navigation. And by link navigation, I mean like if you put a hyperlink into your notes or a link between one note and another, and you put that information into the content of your note. There's been a lot of feedback about what we've done in this current design. You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is a place where, I think we have come to the realization where we didn't get it quite right. I think, again, we have a really broad range of users. And in this case, we're going with a pattern that's very familiar and very accessible to people. So not only does it expose the ability to navigate to a link, but it also makes it really easy to edit the link. Even if you don't have a lot of experience with that, it's very straightforward for folks. But the downside to it is it's a little bit less efficient. You don't have a single click to visit. And I think as we started to look forward to the future and started to really go through the feedback that we were getting with the experience, we realized that we need to make a change. You're going to be seeing some changes to links that should introduce a lot more direct access to your content.
Yeah, the real headline there is, sometime in the next couple of releases, depending on when you watch this video, it might be in a release that's already happened. You'll get back to sort of single click to navigate a link, and we'll still provide mechanisms for editing, et cetera, that are easy to get to and work for both expert users and users who are new to Evernote. So we could do this all day long because frankly there are thousands of design decisions that went into the new apps. But rather than doing that, I think it would probably be more useful to turn instead to the future. As you look ahead at the road ahead, what are you and the design team thinking?
Well, I think the first thing that I want to point out and that I'm most excited about is just the return to velocity. I think over the last several weeks and months, we've shipped more releases than we have in a really long time. Shipping is really the lifeblood of a product design team. You need to be able to turn ideas into products and then put those in front of users so that you can learn, because you're going to learn what you got right and what needs further improvement. And that's the fuel that allows you to move forward and evolve the product and just make it better and better. And so that's super exciting. But I guess if you want to talk about kind of the roadmap for design, I think it really comes down to 3 words. I think the first one is converge. We set out with this initiative to go from 5 different pretty unique experiences to a single consolidated, coherent, and compelling experience so that no matter where you're accessing your information, whether that's on the desktop device or a mobile device, the system looks familiar, you recognize it, and you know how to get things done. You don't have to relearn anything. It all transfers. And so there's more work to be done on that front. I think number 2, I'd give you the word polish. So I think like we're walking through a new house, it's really exciting to see all of these new facilities and some of these amazing qualities that the new products offer. But there's still a lot of detail left to get right and some polish left. And so we're going to be working hard over the coming weeks and months to continue to refine the product and to kind of fill in some of the gaps and get to the place that we envision. And so I think it's exciting to see the product get better and better every week, but there's very much still a lot of work left to do on that front to drive more efficiency and refinement into the new products. And then finally, the word I'd give you is invent. So all of this work, this rebuild, this redesign, really represents a foundation for the future. And I think that's perhaps what I'm most excited about is some of the brand new capabilities that we're going to be able to bring to our users, and just to see what they're able to do with brand new capabilities that the product's never been able to do before. So I think that's something that's really inspiring and exciting for the team here.
Converge, polish, invent. I think that's a pretty good summary of what we're doing now and what we see as we go forward in design. So thanks for that. And thanks, Nate, for joining us here behind the scenes and talking about some of what went into the design decisions for the new apps. I really appreciate your taking the time. And thank you to everybody who's been watching another episode of Behind the Scenes at Evernote, again, here from home. One of these days, we're all looking forward to getting out of home and getting back into the office. But in the meantime, we'll continue to work hard to make Evernote the product that we want it to be and that we all want it to be as well. And I think it's useful for you to see some of the thinking that's behind what we've been doing and some of the work we're doing to continue to make the product better with every passing week. With the holidays coming up, I hope everybody is safe and in good health, and that you're looking forward to a great new year. At Evernote, we're looking forward to a really exciting 2021. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time, Behind the Scenes at Evernote.